Hello, dear friends. It is so wonderful to have you here with us today. Welcome to Books and More, your quiet corner of the world, where we bring you the heart of profound literature. Our goal is to distill the essential wisdom of great books, helping you save time while keeping the core values that make these stories timeless. Have you ever stepped into a large gathering and felt your own personality start to drift away, replaced by a surge of collective emotion? There is a mysterious, invisible thread that binds us when we become part of something larger than ourselves. Today, we delve into a classic that changed the way we see society, The Psychology of Crowds by Gustave Le Bon. This book doesn't just look at people, it looks at the shared soul that emerges when we stand together. It invites us to understand the forces that drive history, revolutions, and our daily interactions. As we open these pages, ask yourself, why does our logic often vanish when we join a group? How do certain voices manage to lead the many with such ease? And most importantly, how can we stay true to ourselves in an age dominated by the crowd? Dear friends, in a world that often feels loud and chaotic, finding clarity is an act of healing. I am here to walk this path of understanding with you, offering a hand as we explore the complexities of the human mind. You are more than just a number or a face in the mass. You are a seeker of wisdom. May this journey bring you peace and a deeper connection to your own inner truth. Let us begin our journey into the heart of the crowd together. Introduction: The Era of Crowds. Throughout my life, I have been deeply fascinated by the character and spirit of nations. I have always believed that beneath the visible actions of history lies a hidden collective unconscious that guides us all. This psychological foundation is what truly shapes the rise and fall of civilizations. In my studies, I have focused on how the mental constitution of a race acts as an invisible network, determining every institution, belief, and artistic expression. It is a biological and psychological inheritance that governs our deepest desires and impulses. My era witnessed a profound and unsettling shift. I saw the traditional pillars of society begin to crumble under the weight of a new and growing power, the crowd. Through my experiences with the Paris Commune and my close observation of the great French revolutions, I realized that we were entering a transitional period of history. The old ideas that once held our world together were losing their influence, while the new ideas destined to replace them were still in the process of forming. This gap creates a state of chaos where the voice of the masses becomes the only force that truly matters. When individuals come together to form a crowd, their conscious personality seems to vanish. They no longer behave as independent, thinking beings. Instead, they are swept up into a collective soul where their feelings and thoughts are all directed toward a single point. In this state, they do not reason with logic. They are driven almost entirely by the unconscious, behaving much like primitive people. They perceive the world through images and simple associations, and they are capable of moving from wild, crazy enthusiasm to a state of foolish apathy in a heartbeat. Because crowds lack the ability to think critically, they have an innate, almost desperate need for a leader. They look for someone who can command their instincts and give them a sense of purpose. I have noticed that these new masters often wield more influence than any established government, because crowds are far more willing to obey a strong leader than they are to follow the laws of the state. A civilization is a delicate structure built on fixed ideals and strict rules. It requires a high level of culture and a clear direction for the future. When a nation loses these things, it loses its soul and reverts to the state of a crowd. History teaches us that when the healthy backbone of a society is broken, it is the unconscious and brutal power of the masses that performs the final act of destruction. While some might say I exaggerate the dangers of the crowd, I believe that understanding this collective mind is the only way to navigate the turbulent times we live in. My work is intended to serve as a reference for those who wish to understand the forces that truly move our world. Whether we agree with these shifts or not, we must acknowledge that the era we are entering is, in every sense, the era of crowds. The soul of the crowd, general characteristics and morality. When I observe the phenomenon of the crowd, I see a transformation that is as sudden as it is profound. It is a mistake to believe that a mere gathering of individuals constitutes what I call a psychological crowd. 1,000 people meeting by chance in a public square do not necessarily form a crowd in the psychological sense. For that to happen, there must be a specific influence or an event that turns their attention toward a single point. When this occurs, a new and singular entity is born. The conscious personality of each individual vanishes, and their feelings and ideas are all turned in the same direction. A collective mind is formed, which, though perhaps transitory, presents very clearly defined characteristics. I call this a psychological crowd, or an organized crowd, which functions as a single being and is subjected to the law of the mental unity of crowds. The most striking feature of this collective mind is that it does not matter who the individuals are that compose it. Whether their mode of life, their occupations, or their intelligence be identical or different, the fact that they have been transformed into a crowd puts them in possession of a sort of collective soul. This soul makes them feel, think, and act in a manner quite different from that in which each individual of them would feel, think, and act were he in a state of isolation. In the collective mind, the intellectual aptitudes of the individuals, and as a consequence, their entire personality, are weakened. The heterogeneous is swamped by the homogeneous, and unconscious qualities obtain the upper hand. This explains why crowds can never accomplish acts which demand a high degree of intelligence. All their decisions are taken by an assembly of men of notable intelligence, but those decisions are not superior to the decisions that would be taken by a gathering of simpletons. They can only accumulate mediocrity. This brings us to the underlying causes of these characteristics. In a crowd, the individual acquires a sentiment of invincible power which allows him to yield to instincts which, had he been alone, he would perforce have kept under restraint. He will be the less disposed to check himself from the consideration that, a crowd being anonymous and, in consequence, irresponsible, the sentiment of responsibility which always controls individuals disappears entirely. There is also the phenomenon of contagion. In a crowd, every sentiment and act is contagious, and contagious to such a degree that an individual readily sacrifices his personal interest to the collective interest. Finally, there is suggestibility. An individual in a crowd finds himself in a state quite similar to the state of a person being hypnotized. His conscious personality has entirely vanished, and his will and discernment are lost. All feelings and thoughts are bent in the direction determined by the observer or the event that sparked the gathering. He is no longer himself, but an automaton who has ceased to be guided by his will. By the mere fact that he forms part of an organized crowd, a man descends several rungs in the ladder of civilization. Isolated, he may be a cultivated individual. In a crowd, he is a barbarian, that is, a creature acting by instinct. He possesses the spontaneity, the violence, the ferocity, and also the enthusiasm and heroism of primitive beings. He is easily led to commit acts that are either vastly superior or vastly inferior to his own character. A crowd is always intellectually inferior to the isolated individual, but from the point of view of feelings and of the acts these feelings provoke, the crowd may, according to circumstances, be better or worse than the individual. Everything depends on the nature of the suggestion to which the crowd is exposed. The sentiments of crowds are marked by impulsiveness, irritability, and an inability to be guided by reason. A crowd is at the mercy of all external stimuli and reflects their incessant variations. It is the slave of the impulses which it receives. The individual may be submitted to the same exciting causes as the man in a crowd, but as his reason shows him that it is not wise to yield to them, he refrains. In a crowd, this reasoning power is absent. Because of their number, they feel a sense of omnipotence. The notion of impossibility disappears for the individual in a crowd. He will set fire to a palace or loot a shop at the slightest suggestion, acts he would never dream of doing alone. We must also recognize the extreme suggestibility and credulity of crowds. They wander in the dark regions of the unconscious, susceptible to every influence and driven by intense emotion. A crowd thinks in images, and each image calls up a series of other images having no logical connection with the first. They cannot distinguish between the subjective and the objective. They accept as real the images evoked in their minds, even when they have only a remote connection with the observed fact. This is why collective hallucinations are so frequent and why the testimony of thousands of witnesses can be the most unreliable of all. The first suggestion that is formulated is immediately transmitted by contagion to all brains, and the direction of the sentiments is at once fixed. The emotions of a crowd are always characterized by being very simple and very exaggerated. In this regard, the individual in a crowd resembles primitive beings. He does not know what doubt or uncertainty is. He goes at once to extremes. A suspicion is transformed as soon as it is uttered into incontrovertible evidence. A dislike or disapproval, which in the case of an isolated individual would not gain strength, becomes at once furious hatred in the case of the individual in a crowd. The violence of the feelings of crowds is also increased by the absence of responsibility. The certainty of impunity, a certainty the more complete, the more numerous the crowd, and the notion of a considerable momentary power make it possible for crowds to manifest sentiments and perform acts impossible to the isolated individual. Furthermore, crowds are characterized by intolerance, dictatorial spirit, and conservatism. They are only cognizant of simple and extreme sentiments. The opinions, ideas, and beliefs suggested to them are accepted or rejected as a whole and considered as either absolute truths or as not less absolute errors. A crowd is ready to rebel against a weak authority, but it bows down servilely before a strong one. If the strength of authority is intermittent, the crowd, always obedient to its extreme sentiments, passes alternately from anarchy to servitude and from servitude to anarchy. Despite their revolutionary impulses, crowds are at bottom governed by conservative instincts. Their fetish-like respect for traditions is absolute. Their unconscious horror of all novelty, capable of changing the essential conditions of their existence, is very deeply rooted. If we judge crowds only by their destructive nature, we might think their morality is very low. It is true that they often yield to low instincts, but they are also capable of acts of lofty devotion, self-sacrifice, and disinterestedness. The individual in a crowd may be incited to a high degree of glory, honor, and patriotism. History is full of examples of crowds that have allowed themselves to be slaughtered for beliefs and ideas they scarcely understood. This collective heroism is rarely prompted by self-interest, which is almost the only guide of the isolated individual. Personal interest is very rarely a powerful motive with crowds, while it is almost the exclusive motive of the individual. We may even say that if crowds had not been capable of high morality and self-sacrifice, the world would have stayed in its primitive state, and no civilization would have ever developed. The imagination and religious beliefs of crowds. When we look at the evolution of civilizations, we see that ideas are the true masters of the world, yet they only reach the crowd after undergoing a complete transformation. I have found that ideas generally fall into two categories: those that are fleeting and change like the wind, often influenced by a passing fashion or a charismatic individual, and those that are fundamental. These fundamental ideas are the deep currents of history. They are the beliefs of our ancestors, our religious dogmas, and our social concepts that take centuries to form and just as long to disappear. For an idea to truly penetrate the mind of a crowd, it must be stripped of its complexity and reduced to a very simple, visible form. It must become an image. The crowd does not possess the capacity for critical logic. In the silence of a library, an individual might weigh evidence and follow a chain of reasoning, but once that individual is part of a crowd, those faculties vanish. The reasoning of a crowd is primitive, based only on the association of things that appear similar on the surface. They are like the savage who believes that by eating the heart of a brave enemy, he will acquire that enemy's courage. Crowds do not seek the truth through evidence. They are swayed by assertions and simple generalizations. A speaker who tries to use cold logic or mathematical proof will find himself ignored. To lead them, one must instead use powerful words that evoke vivid pictures. If a leader can successfully plant a striking image in their minds, the crowd will follow that image, regardless of how illogical or contradictory it may be. I have often observed that crowds live in a state of constant, vivid dreaming. To them, the unreal is just as significant as the real. Their imagination is so powerful that they do not distinguish between a factual event and a legendary tale. This is why the theater has such a profound grip on the collective soul. The entire audience experiences the same emotions at the same moment, and for that hour, the drama on stage is the only reality that matters. I have even heard of instances where an actor playing a villain had to be protected after a performance because the crowd was so moved by the imagined crime that they wished to punish the man in the flesh. For a crowd, the marvelous and the legendary are the true pillars of civilization. The truth is often too dull to inspire, but a magnificent myth can move millions. This susceptibility to the imagination leads us to a crucial realization. All the beliefs of a crowd inevitably take on a religious form. When I speak of a religious sentiment, I am not referring only to the worship of a god. I am describing a specific state of mind. This state is defined by the blind adoration of a superior being or a powerful idea, the fear of the power attributed to it, and a complete inability to discuss or question its dogmas. Whether the crowd is following a prophet, a revolutionary leader, or a social theory, they do so with a fervor that is entirely religious in nature. They view those who do not share their belief as enemies, and they are willing to sacrifice everything for the cause they have embraced. Even those movements that claim to be the enemies of religion, such as the most radical political revolutions, eventually adopt these same religious characteristics. I have seen how the leaders of the French Revolution, while tearing down the statues of saints, merely replaced them with new idols and new altars. They demanded the same absolute obedience and practiced the same intolerance as the Inquisitions of old. This is because the crowd cannot exist without a faith of some kind. They need a master, a hero, or a doctrine to believe in. Napoleon understood this better than anyone. He did not rule the French people through logic. He ruled them by becoming a god in their eyes. He understood that to lead a crowd, one must not address their reason, but their soul, providing them with a faith that satisfies their need for the sacred. The true power of an idea is never found in its intellectual validity, but in the religious passion it inspires within the heart of the multitude. The forces behind popular beliefs and opinions. I have spent much of my life observing how the collective mind operates, and that I am convinced that the beliefs of a crowd are never the result of mere chance. They are the fruit of a slow and hidden process. To understand why a mass of people suddenly adopts a certain conviction or turns toward a specific idea, we must look at two distinct types of forces: the remote factors that prepare the soil and the immediate factors that finally cause the plant to bloom. Among the remote factors, nothing carries more weight than race. It is the bedrock upon which everything else is built. The soul of a race dictates how a crowd will react to any given stimulus. You might see two different nations adopt the same laws or the same religion, but beneath the surface, they will interpret and experience them in entirely different ways because their ancestral heritage is different. Following race, we find the immense power of traditions. Traditions represent the ideas and sentiments of the past that continue to weigh upon us. They are the invisible guides of our civilization. I believe that a people is an organism created by its history, and while we often dream of radical change through revolution, we are essentially the slaves of our ancestors. We can change the names of things, but the underlying soul remains. Then there is time. Time is the only real creator and the only real destroyer. It allows certain ideas to take root and gain power, and it eventually turns them into ruins. No political system or belief can be imposed successfully if time has not prepared the ground for it. This leads me to institutions. Many social reformers believe that changing a law or a constitution can improve a nation, but I argue that institutions are merely the outward expression of a race's character. A nation does not choose its institutions any more than a man chooses the color of his eyes. Character, not government, determines the destiny of a people. I must also speak of education, a subject that often brings me much criticism. In our current system, we have confused instruction with education. We force young minds to memorize vast quantities of textbook knowledge that has no relation to real life. This does not improve their morality or their intelligence. Instead, it creates a class of individuals who are overeducated for the roles available to them, leading to a deep sense of resentment. They become a ready-made army for any revolutionary movement, not because they have learned to think, but because they have learned to be dissatisfied with their station in life. Once these long-term factors have prepared the crowd, certain immediate factors step in to trigger action. The most powerful of these is the use of images, words, and formulas. Crowds do not think in logical sequences, they think in images. If you can evoke a vivid image in their minds, you can control them. Certain words have a truly magical power, even if they have no clear definition. Words like democracy, equality, or liberty carry a mysterious force. To a crowd, these are not philosophical concepts, but buttons that, when pressed, release a flood of emotion. The less a word is defined, the more influence it seems to have. We must also recognize that crowds are driven by illusions. Since the dawn of civilization, mankind has always sought out the marvelous. We prefer a beautiful error to a harsh truth. The person who can provide the crowd with a grand illusion will always be their master, while the person who tries to awaken them with the truth will almost always be their victim. Science has never promised us happiness, only truth, but the crowd craves happiness and hope above all else. This is why movements like socialism gain such ground today. They offer the ultimate modern illusion of an earthly paradise. Experience is perhaps the only force capable of destroying these dangerous illusions, but even experience works slowly. It often takes several generations and the shock of a great catastrophe for a crowd to finally let go of a deeply held error. We see this in history through the blood and fire of revolutions that were necessary just to prove a simple point. Finally, we come to reason. It is a common mistake to believe that logic can move a crowd. I have observed that logic and reason are entirely absent from the collective mind. A crowd can only understand ideas that are presented in a crude and simplified form. If you wish to persuade a mass of people, you must appeal to their passions, their hopes, and their fears. You must never try to prove anything with cold evidence. You must simply affirm, repeat, and let the contagion of emotion do the rest. The great leaders of history have always known this. They did not win over the world with logical arguments, but by mastering the art of speaking to the hidden, unconscious soul of the multitude. Leaders of crowds and the boundaries of opinion. Whenever a certain number of living beings are gathered together, whether they are a herd of animals or a company of men, they instinctively place themselves under the authority of a chief. In human crowds, the leader plays a vital role as the nucleus around which opinions are formed and identified. He is the soul of the group, providing the direction that the crowd, being a headless beast, cannot provide for itself. Most often, these leaders are not men of thought, but men of action. They are rarely gifted with far-seeing intelligence, as such clarity often leads to doubt and inaction. Instead, they are recruited from the ranks of those who are morbidly nervous, excitable, or half-deranged, possessed by a persistent idea that they feel a frantic need to realize. For these men, no sacrifice is too great, and even the instinct of self-preservation is forgotten in their pursuit of an ideal. Their will is the force that commands the obedience of the crowd, which, having no will of its own, turns instinctively to anyone who possesses it. I have observed two distinct types of such leaders. There are those who possess a fleeting, violent energy, useful for leading a sudden riot or a daring attack, but whose influence vanishes as quickly as the passion that fueled it. Far more rare and significant are the leaders with a long-term, persistent will. These are the men who found religions and great empires, like Muhammad or Columbus. Their tenacity is a force that nothing can resist, not even the gods themselves. To sway a crowd, these leaders do not rely on logical evidence. Their methods are simpler and far more effective: affirmation, repetition, and contagion. A concise affirmation, kept free from all reasoning and proof, is the surest way to plant an idea in the popular mind. But for that idea to truly take root, it must be repeated incessantly, using the same terms if possible. This repetition eventually carves the idea into the depths of the unconscious, where the motives for our actions are forged. Once an idea has been repeated enough, it spreads through the crowd like a virus through the mechanism of contagion. It is not logic that makes an idea popular, but this mysterious mental infection that causes a whole generation to adopt the same style of thinking, the same fashions, and the same beliefs. The true source of a leader's power is what I call prestige. It is a sort of magnetic enchantment that a person, a work, or an idea exerts over us. This influence completely paralyzes our critical faculty and fills our souls with astonishment and respect. There is an acquired prestige that comes from titles, wealth, or a great name, which can make even a mediocre man appear like a giant. Then there is personal prestige, a much rarer quality, possessed by the great masters of humanity. Consider Napoleon, whose mere look could crush the will of hardened generals who had intended to defy him. Prestige is the mainspring of all authority, but it is also fragile. It is maintained only by success and disappears the moment a leader fails. More importantly, it cannot survive discussion. The moment a crowd begins to debate a leader's prestige, that prestige is gone. To be admired by a crowd, one must always keep them at a distance. When we look at the opinions of crowds, we see they fall into two categories. First, there are the great, permanent beliefs that last for centuries and form the very framework of a civilization, such as the feudal system or the Christian ideals of the past. These fixed beliefs are incredibly difficult to establish and even harder to uproot. They are only discarded when they have lost their power over the soul, usually through a violent revolution that marks the end of an era. Second, there are the transitory opinions that fluctuate on the surface, born of the moment and dying just as quickly. These are the fads of literature, art, or politics that change like the seasons. In our modern age, we are witnessing a peculiar phenomenon. The old fixed beliefs are fading, and nothing has yet risen to take their place. Because of this, the fleeting opinions of the crowd have become more volatile than ever. The press, which once directed public opinion, now merely reflects it. Fearing to lose their readers, newspapers present every side of an issue, which leads to a total loss of direction. The government, too, has become a slave to these shifting whims, no longer leading but following the unpredictable currents of popular sentiment. While this volatility and the growing indifference of the crowd may seem chaotic, it serves a purpose. It prevents any single half-baked idea from gaining enough stability to become a permanent tyranny. In this sea of changing opinions, the only force that remains steady is the racial soul, which eventually pulls all straying ideas back toward its fundamental character. The classification and description of the different categories of crowds. I have found it necessary to organize the various types of crowds into a clear system to truly understand their behavior. At the most basic level, we have heterogeneous crowds, which are made up of individuals from all walks of life, regardless of their profession or intelligence. These can be further divided into anonymous groups, like those we see gathering on a street corner, and non-anonymous groups, such as juries or parliamentary assemblies. Beyond these, we find homogeneous crowds, where members are linked by a shared identity. These include sects, which are united by a common belief, castes, defined by a professional or military rank, and classes, which arise from similar social interests and upbringings. Regardless of their specific type, once these individuals form a crowd, their personal identity fades and is replaced by a collective mind that operates under the laws of suggestion and contagion. When we look at the phenomenon of criminal crowds, it becomes clear that the term is somewhat of a misnomer from a psychological standpoint. While their actions may be illegal or even horrific, the crowd itself does not feel criminal. Instead, it is usually acting under a powerful suggestion, believing it is fulfilling a noble patriotic duty. I recall the tragic end of the governor of the Bastille, who was murdered not by cold-blooded killers, but by a crowd of ordinary people caught in a frenzy of misguided heroism. An unemployed cook in that crowd truly believed he was performing a service to his country by participating in the act. This reveals the immense power of the collective soul to override individual morality and replace it with a temporary, impulsive set of values. Juries offer another fascinating look at how these psychological laws function in a non-anonymous crowd. It is a common mistake to believe that a jury of highly educated men would reach a more rational verdict than one made up of simple laborers. In reality, once they are seated together, their intellectual differences vanish. They are swayed by the same emotional appeals and the same personal prestige of the orators who speak to them. A clever lawyer knows that a jury will be lenient toward a crime committed out of passion, but will be merciless toward any act that seems to threaten the stability of society. They do not judge based on the letter of the law, but on the impressions made upon their collective soul. This same logic applies to voters during an election. A candidate does not win by presenting a reasoned argument or a detailed political program. He wins through prestige. Whether that prestige comes from his wealth, his reputation, or his ability to use powerful, resonant words, it is the only force that truly moves the electorate. The crowd of voters has no patience for complexity. They want to be flattered, and they want to hear grand promises about a glorious future, even if those promises are impossible to keep. Once the election is over, the voter rarely remembers what was promised, and the candidate is not held accountable to the logic of his previous speeches. In our parliamentary assemblies, we see the most refined version of crowd psychology. These bodies are the preferred method of government for modern civilizations because they offer a safeguard against the tyranny of a single individual. However, they are still crowds. Within the walls of Parliament, we see the same simplicity of ideas and the same vulnerability to the influence of a few powerful leaders. These leaders do not command through superior intelligence, but through their personal authority and their mastery of the spoken word. They use slogans and imagery to bypass the critical thinking of their colleagues. The greatest risk we face in this system is the relentless growth of legislation. Each new law is intended to fix a specific problem, but the cumulative effect is a vast, suffocating bureaucracy that gradually strips away individual liberty and turns citizens into passive shadows of their former selves. We see here the final stage of a civilization as it moves from the bold energy of a young race to the mechanical, regulated existence that precedes its ultimate decay. This is the cycle of history, driven by the mysterious and irresistible forces of the popular mind.